Okay, welcome to the second podcast of the original Transplants.
You are Will, I am Sarah, and together we're the stewards of Satoyama Homestead in Warwick, Pennsylvania.
I would like to name myself Will the Thrice Stung, or something like that.
Okay.
It's actually probably more than 3 times. But
Three times.
We could talk about that more.
Absolutely. So before we get into too much business, we want to remind you that you can find a transcript of this episode, episode 2, along with show notes and references. That will be posted at our Tumblr, spreadcast.tumblr.com, which you can also find linked from our homepage, satoyamahs.org. And you'll be finding this podcast at our SoundCloud account under Satoyama Homestead in the playlist or set for original Transplants. All right. First on the agenda, we're going to give you an apiary update, a poultry culture update, and a garden and landscape update.
Do you want to start with the poultry? Because I thought I heard you trying to corral some of our feathered friends.
Yes, so we're approaching about 7 p.m. Eastern time here at Satoyama, and we're entering that sort of crepuscular pre-twilight period where you see a lot of predatory action going down. So before Will and I committed to an hour or so discussing the update from the homestead and our ag news, I wanted to make sure that the chickens were secured, at least in their run underneath the chicken tractor condo, which we discussed last week. So, I have to say, for chickens, they're actually fairly good at being, herded and sort of following directional orders. I will say, in terms of an update, that today they made a major breakthrough, and for us, it's pretty much game over because they discovered our cultivated raspberry bramble.
That's it.
I thought they were going to go completely bananas, but they didn't, which I think...
Raspberries.
Yes, yes, completely raspberries indeed. We are Zone 5 after all.
Yeah.
But, they definitely were excited. In particular, Dandelion, our Americana, was pulling them right off the vine, right off the cane. The other 3 were kind of pecking them off the ground, which I don't mind, gleaning. That's fair. So that happened today. In other news, last week when we had talked about caulking their coop, which I think did help, although we had some torrential rain this past Thursday night.
Yep.
So that came in the little windows of their coop regardless, but I do think they're in good shape. I cleaned out their coop today. Obviously, they've been fed and watered. They've been having the run of the yard all day, including of the raspberry bramble. And so they're all doing good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
I know you didn't do a bee inspection today because of things that will be discussed soon, but would you like to give a general update on the bees? Or maybe talk about some other things that we've seen going on up at the apiary?
Yeah, well, the last time we had the podcast, they had been doing okay, but I had transferred a frame of eggs from one to the other to try to get the second hive jump started. And as far as I can tell, it looks good.
Cool.
So I went up there a couple times this week, and there was definite activity going on at the front door. So I think they're good. We extracted some honey. You'll be able to see that on the Tumblr. And
spreadcast.tumblr.com.
Yes, thank you. That's pretty much. Yeah, they seem to be doing good. This is again the dearth, so there's not a lot going on. They do tend
unless they visit the Bishop Medicinal Herb Spa and Pollinator Garden,
which they are.
Yeah, that's true.
Occasionally, but not often. But they really, I think they like the tree pollen the best, and there's not a lot of that.
And the bramble, and that's all pretty much pollinated.
Yeah, the big blooms right now we're between them. We should have goldenrod, aster, some things later in the season, and at which point, hopefully they'll be in shape to pull us some more honey.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I don't know if we actually have the jars to do it at this point.
Jars can be acquired.
Jars can be acquired, but they took up a lot of jars.
Yeah. So we would say about a gallon. Yeah. Relatedly, so you said there's basically an uptick in activity. We've also had better weather for bee foraging.
I think that helps.
We've had some sun, we've had some seasonable temperatures, so that's definitely been an improvement. I didn't know if you wanted to mention the other specimen that we found in the apiary this week.
So, yeah, I forget what day it was that I went out there. was earlier in the week. Go out. I had put a little stump next to just a piece of a tree around next to the hive, so you could sit down and look at them. And,
Which converts it from a simple apiary into an outdoor classroom.
yes, it does.
Magically, with the addition of a stump.
One stump, and you're in classroom. And the bees were behaved, so I hadn't sat down, but I was about to. And I looked, and I saw some strange growth on the stump. And then you took some pictures and did a lot of research and put up a post on the Tumblr. But
Indeed. Fuligo septica, breaking it down.
Yeah, what's the name of this?
So the Latin name, if I'm pronouncing it and remembering it correctly, was Fuligo septica, which is a slime mold. It's one of the more common, if not most common, slime molds that preys on decaying wood, and that's its habitat.
Slime mold.
It's more affectionately or commonly referred to as the dog vomit slime mold due to what I find to be a very beautiful yellow color. Apparently not everybody sees it that way, maybe, or maybe they're describing it mid-dispersal stage, I'm not sure. But some of the more fascinating things that we learned about Fuligo septica and other slime molds you can find on that Tumblr post. Look for Fuligo septica, breaking it down.
So the slime mold, is it both the yellow dust, like the yellow spores, as well as the fleshy looking creepers that are on the actual stump?
Yeah, it goes through this
both.
Interesting life cycle, which I probably can't describe entirely accurately, but there's a number of links from our Tumblr post.
Yes.
So it goes through a life cycle that's kind of fungus-like in that it can spread by spores, but also kind of animal-like in that it's mobile. I found that it can clock a top speed of about 1 millimeter per hour, I believe it was.
That's crazy.
Or it might have been per day. You'll have to go to the Tumblr to find out because my memory is compromised.
Yeah.
But and the other interesting thing that I found out about it, because it's mobile, and when it's moving, it's pursuing nutrients. It consumes nutrients through phagocytosis. So what we forgot to mention is that entire organism that you're seeing in the pictures is a single multinucleate cell. So it's kind of like an amoeba. It's a single-celled organism. And what happens is all these individual Fuligo septica cells kind of find each other and fuse together and combine their nuclei. So when they fuse, they enlarge their overall cell membrane and become a single cell with multiple nuclei contributed by the thousands and thousands of individual cells that have joined the organism. So they combine to be more mobile and to reproduce, and to eat, right? So they engulf decaying organic, primarily vegetative matter, and they prey on the bacteria, yeast, and sort of other small protozoa that live and fungi that live on that decaying matter, and that's they literally are decomposing that organic matter and absorbing the nutrients through phagocytosis.
So then they go on to star opposite Steve McQueen in classic horror movies.
Exactly. So these were some of the things that I was learning. So The Blob, and this weekend in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, just east of us on Route 23, they're celebrating Blob Fest. I can't do math, but it came out, the sci-fi classic, in 1958, so this is the fill-in-the-blank anniversary of the film, which is what they're celebrating. And a lot of people say that monster, that creature feature, the Blob, was based on research about slime molds and phagocytosis and their mobility. The other thing that we can mention, some cool sort of pop culture or other scientific influences that slime molds have had, is that, as we said, when they move, they're pursuing nutrients. And they actually optimize their movement, their direction, in search of nutrients. And it kind of works similar to networks of ants, ant colonies, or birds flocking, in that it's a leaderless movement, but it's optimized and very efficient and very effective. So modeling slime mold movement has contributed to that STAR logo program, which also models the works of ant colonies and bird flocks and these other sort of leaderless multi-organism efforts. And Star logo, I think, is related to the programming of game character movement within video games. So thinking again about optimizing routes based on computational and mathematical models or algorithms of slime mold movement. So again, if you check out that Tumblr post at spreadcast.tumblr.com, one of the things you'll see is a link to a video. And we credit the person, I want to say their name was Adam Adamatsky, but that might not be completely accurate. But there is a credit for them there, where they took a video of a slime mold solving a maze based on a nutrient trail that was left within the sort of petri dish maze. There's also a video that PBS was featuring of another researcher who was investigating slime molds, where they put pockets of nutrients at these major transportation hubs in the Canadian interstate or they don't have states there. What do they have? Province, intra-province transportation network.
Right.
And the slime mold essentially recreated their highway network by pursuing these little pockets of nutrients across the map of Canada. So it's really interesting to watch. So again, modeling computationally and mathematically the movement of slime molds has contributed to things like the Star Logo program, which you can look up more about, and also the programmed movement of characters in video games. So very cool. And then, The Blob, 1958, definitely check it out. It's worth a look-see. I think it was remade. Is that accurate?
Yeah, but you don't want to watch that.
Watch the original.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's Fuligoseptica, our slime mold. I think it's since dried out and gone dormant.
We don't.
But it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, it's not as much rain anymore, and I'm glad because I don't need it creeping in on my bees. I'm sure the honey is something that I would love to eat.
I will say that when I was
honey?
doing the research, people said it's basically harmless. We also came across this random culinary reference that allegedly a certain American Hemisphere nation serves Fuligoseptica as food. I couldn't determine the veracity of that claim, so I'm not even going to go there. But allegedly, you can scramble it like scrambled eggs when it's in the certain phase of its life cycle.
If you close your eyes and scramble it, and maybe close your eyes and eat it, maybe you can't tell the difference.
Right. And also I will say that the name of this alleged dish translated into English was basically poop of the moon. So again, take that for what it's worth. We didn't do the full due diligence of research on that subject, but that's all we probably have to say about Fuligoseptica, the slime mold that was living in the apiary. On the
dog vomit.
Yes, the dog vomit slime mold on the stump that constituted the outdoor classroom up there.
That's awesome.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for the apiary update.
Sure.
The last thing that we sort of neglected last week was a garden and landscape update, so I'll do a bit of that. Our bio-intensive kitchen gardens doing pretty well. The main issue that we've had that we talked about last week was sort of an overabundance, let's say, of rain and less than we'd like to see of some sunshine, which seem to be correcting at least over this weekend. We're getting a lot of sun, which is great. Actually, today was the first time I watered any of our container gardens from the rain barrels in as many weeks as I can remember. Unsolicited shout out to Camel's Hump Rain Barrels out of Phoenixville, coincidentally, along with the Blob and Blob Fest. We have 2 of their rain barrels, which we purchased from Sugarbush Nursery. Unsolicited shout out for that native plant nursery over in Moton, PA, just south of Reading on Route 10. The rain barrels are great. They're made from upcycled, repurposed, food grade olive barrels, 55-gallon barrels in which I guess olives were imported.
We really like olives here at Satoyama.
Actually, Will does.
I did not eat 55 gallons of
Oh,
olives.
true. No. But somebody did, and then Camel's Hump Rain Barrels out of Phoenixville converted the drums, the 55-gallon drums, into rain barrels, which is awesome. And so, yeah, I believe, I can't say this 100%, with 100% certainty, but I believe all the watering I've done so far this year in the landscape and of the bio-intensive kitchen garden has been, as well as in the house with the houseplants, has been from the rain barrels.
That's great.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I watered a container gardens today. Our container tomatoes are looking awesome. We have some Cascade cherry tomatoes growing along with some kind of pepper. I can't remember if it's a hot or sweet in one container. We also have a Patio Princess hybrid tomato growing in another container. We have a third experimental container of a Milpa Three Sisters planting, which again is corn. We actually have an heirloom variety of purple kernel corn. I think it's called Rose Potpourri. I forget which variety of bean I planted there. And then just today, I know it's really late. I've had a lot of problem with our various soft-skinned squash plants. But just today, I put in some transplants of Cherokee Moon and Stars watermelon, which is an heirloom watermelon whose rind gets this gorgeous design of yellow flecks and this yellow crescent, hence the name Moon and Stars. So we'll see how that container goes. I'm hoping it's large enough for all of those plants to coexist happily and get the space and the nutrients that they need from the soil. Definitely have to monitor it. It's an experiment. As I started down in the kitchen garden, things are going well. We've eaten recently turnips with their turnip green tops, beets, and their beet tops. All the salad greens are still coming in with the exception of the spinach and the arugula. They're pretty much gone to seed, and the mustard has gone to seed. The collards had gone to seed, and now I'm seeing greens again, so I'm excited. I think that's a biennial plant, so this might be its second season, and then they might die back and we'll have to plant new for next year.
Or let it seed itself, right?
Or let it seed itself, optimistically, right?
Yeah.
But we have an experiment to seed save from the collards and some of the other greens, where I actually took women's ankle-high and knee-high nylons and delicately sort of basically, I stretched the nylons over my hand. I gently grasped the topmost seed pods on the stalks coming off of the greens, the collards, the mustards, believe I did the chard, etc. And then I kind of wrapped the nylons down over the stalk of seed pods and then secured it with a twisty tie. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, air can move through them. Hopefully they're not growing mold with all the rain that they've had. Mm. But the seed pods, as they dry out and mature and burst open and release the seeds, that'll all be trapped within the little nylon sock. And then I can just kind of cut the stalk off and turn it over. That saves some of the guesswork on collecting the seeds either too early or too late after they've already burst and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to see how that goes. Those are the greens. The tomatoes are still pretty much green, although I did see a reddening one today. I believe it was on one of the Principe Borghese tomato plants, which is an heirloom variety that's particularly good for dehydrating and making sun-dried tomatoes. We also planted Matina variety, I believe it's called, beefsteak, some seeds that we saved from our neighbor Amy's cherry tomato plants, and I believe that's all of those. And then, as I mentioned, the patio princess. So those are doing well.
Not to mention that we have, because we do a lot of permaculture, aka throwing rotten things into the woods. We have
and the lawn in general.
And the lawn. We have rogue tomatoes popping up in some places. So
yeah, I'm thinking we have a rogue cherry tomato and a rogue slicing tomato of some variety. I'm not sure if it's a globe or the Principe Borghese is more of a plum.
It's good genetics, though.
Yes, we should totally try to save seeds from those. Absolutely. So that's that. And what else? The squash plants are sort of just coming in. We've had a couple of accidental zucchini. I thought I had saved seeds from, again, our neighbor Amy's spaghetti squash plant. They must have been mislabeled because they turned out to be zucchini. And we've had one sort of enormous one that I kind of let on the vine a little bit too long come in. And we put that in a curry, so that was fine. And we shredded half of it to make that chocolate zucchini bread.
You can't make
more like
spaghetti squash bread.
No.
Nobody eats that. Zucchini bread, though.
Chocolate zucchini bread, a.k.a.
bread.
cake.
That's where it's at, yeah.
Yeah. Cake. Cosby's not the only one that does cake for breakfast,
Cake for
right?
breakfast, yeah.
So that's that. And today I just pulled off a smaller one, which is will probably be more palatable. But yeah, so the squash are doing a lot of vegetative growth. We're not seeing yet a whole lot of flowering or fruit growth.
Yeah.
That's the biointensive kitchen garden and the squash plants. Today, I spent many hours doing some cleanup in the, as I said earlier, the Bisha Medicinal Herbs Spa, which is also our pollinator garden. So basically every plant that we planted there is both pollinator friendly and edible or medicinal in some way. And today what I was doing is sort of deadheading the oxeye daisies because they will spread like insanity. And staking, I don't usually stake plants, but they were getting a little bit unruly. So I decided to put in some bamboo stakes, and we had some leftover, some kind of like polyplastic stakes that we had used for tomatoes before. And I staked some of the borage. I staked some of the dill, which was getting really tall. I staked some of the yarrow. We have white yarrow and then some really pretty pink and red sort of burgundy yarrow.
Yep.
And I think, and I staked the feverfew. Also in that process, I harvested some of the yarrow and some of our oregano, dried some of the flowers whole because my goal is to be able to make a decorative wreath for our front door, a multi-season wreath of dried flowers from the homestead.
Nice.
So I'm working up to that. Earlier on, I had dehydrated also some yarrow and some bitter dock, and that's actually an interesting flower to have dehydrated. So I'm sort of building up a collection. I'd like to get all the way through the goldenrod probably and see where I'm at.
Bitter dock is the reddish flower. It's like a maroon.
It's a stalk
Yeah.
of tiny flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weed for most people, but it is technically edible. The birds really like it because of the seeds. The chickens have nibbled at it. The turkeys, we've seen the turkeys nibbling at it. And then anytime I look at it, it's absolutely a habitat for some kind of insect, grasshopper, locust, cricket, whatever. They're all over it. So, I don't let them all grow, but there's a couple that I've let completely grow mature throughout the no-mow lawn because they're interesting to look at. Again, they're edible in a pinch. And like I said, I harvested some of the stalks, which turned this really pretty burgundy color, and then dehydrated them in the dehydrator, dried them out in their sort of three-dimensional shape as opposed to pressing to make a wreath out of them.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. And I also dried some of the yarrow leaves, which are considered medicinal, and I'll apologize, I don't remember what the yarrow leaf tincture is good for at the moment.
Everything. It's kind of a panacea.
Is that one of those panaceas?
It's a cure-all. Yeah.
All right, cool. And also some of the oregano, which in addition to being a culinary herb, I think also has some beneficial nutritive or medicinal propries. But again, I'm not remembering what they are at the moment. So, that was all
good on pizza.
Also good on pizza.
Yeah.
Oregano to you.
Oregano.
Spaced reference. So what else is going on in the landscape? We already talked about Fuligo septica. We've talked about the biointensive kitchen garden.
We're getting wine berries now, which are
bramble update.
It's a bramble, but it's actually it's an East Asian import, and it's invasive.
Technically invasive, but
it's
delicious.
also it's awesome, and it's pretty prolific. I mean, it puts out a lot of berries, and in general, the thorns are not very.
They're more of a fuzz than a thorn.
Yeah, I mean, it'll still irritate your skin, but picking them is not nearly as dangerous to your hands as it is with the regular brambles.
Or the blackberries. Or
the blackberries, yeah. So plenty of those, and like you said, our raspberries are coming in, except that the chickens have now found them, and they're destined to be
converted to eggs, meat, and manure.
Yeah, that's true. For the first foot
on the positive side,
the first foot of raspberries is probably going to be sacrificed to the little terrors of the yard.
I'm just thankful that because our raspberry bramble is pretty close to our strawberry patch, and strawberry season's basically over. I mean, we do have, I think we have some everbears, so I'm expecting a second crop.
That was their favorite thing.
But that was their favorite thing, was sluggy strawberries, and we don't have to compete with them for strawberries because that season's pretty much wrapped up for now.
We'll see about next year, but what else is going on?
I also, as we mentioned last week, did some cleanup down along the gravel driveway, spreading new gravel and tamping it down, and then I had done some cleanup in those beds and planted some zinnias, which have sprouted. So hopefully they'll have enough of a season that they can come up and provide some more forage and habitat for our pollinators. We've seen a number of butterflies, none of which we've identified, so you'll have to excuse us for that, but they're definitely hatching. And then maybe while we're on the subject of insects and habitats, we can transition into talking about one of our other chores that we've tackled this weekend.
So we have we have a split level house, and the stairs up to the front door, which is sort of situated right in the middle, smack in the middle of the house, was all railroad timbers. Probably decades old at this point. Some of them were very rotted out. They were staked 3 feet down, and
I would argue that they're potentially original to the house.
So,
given the level of decomposition,
probably 40 years.
Close to 40 years, yeah.
So those needed to go. So we decided to tackle that ourselves because paying somebody for that just seemed...
Actually, we offered to pay someone and they really didn't bite at it. And we were like, all right,
well,
I guess it's one of those jobs.
I gotta say, after doing it myself, I wouldn't want to do it either. Yeah. So pulling the timbers up has been a major chore, but we did a pretty good job. Everything seemed to be going well until last night, probably 6 o'clock. I was just finishing up. I wanted to get one more of the timbers out, and as I was trying to cut it with the chainsaw, out came our best friend, the black rat snake. Big old 5-foot snake came slithering out from underneath it.
So I'll just interject here that we're going to do a Team Baby Bird update in a little bit, but if you want to know more about the black rat snakes, you should check out the Come On Happy Chickens Come On post at spreadcast.tumblr.com.
Yep.
Carry on, Will.
Yeah, they're pretty scary. I mean, they're pretty harmless as well. But
One
they
thing
are
they'll do-
startling. They're startling. I
Yeah.
mean, and then they'll act like a rattlesnake.
Exactly.
I'm sure that their bite is not pleasant. But they are constrictors, so they're not really relying on poison and things like that to hurt their prey or to disable their prey. What is relying on poison, or more specifically venom, to harm its prey is the wasp nest that I discovered, 15 minutes later, and got stung pretty well by that. It had made its home underneath one of these rotted timbers. So I convinced Sarah to help me out in a night operation. We donned bee veils.
I was going to say, we were applying some of our knowledge of the hive in the assumption that that knowledge would be applicable to working with the wasps.
It was only somewhat useful. I mean,
Yeah.
putting on the veils, we put on veils.
Multiple layers of
Multiple
protective
layers
gear.
of clothing. They did get through my t-shirt yesterday, so
Some
I was thinking that maybe putting on a jacket will help. Of course, it was warm last night, so you're already drenched in sweat by the time you start donning all these clothes. We did so we began to pull this timber out. It's dark. We kept one light on in order to see by. I tried to light my bee smoker, but it didn't really take by the time I wanted to get that going. It did put smoke all over the place, so I guess
think that helped. I'm going to put that in the it helped column.
All right, fair enough. I mean, it did something. It made me feel better at the very least. And then I situated myself where I knew the hive was, and I put Sarah at the other end of this long 8-foot timber.
What a guy.
We started to haul it out using crowbar shovels to get it over the stakes that were in the ground. And I heard two things. First was a slithering, and then I also heard a buzzing. And I was like, I've got a couple seconds here before I am done for. The snake doesn't come out where it came out before, which is right next to the steps, but instead came out at my feet. So I got the snake coiled around my feet, and then I hear the buzzing, and I smushed Sarah's fingers. We did manage to get the timber up and off and then turned over, and then we ran. Somehow, I mean, I didn't secure it as well as I could have. One of the wasps climbed into my glove and started to sting me. This sting, I would trade bee sting for wasp sting any day of the week.
Yeah.
Because last night I woke up, as you know, with severe pain in my arm, and it was referring all the way up to my shoulder. They got a heck of a sting, those wasps. And they can sting multiple times. Unlike bees sting once. They rip their guts out when they do it.
Which you recently learned is actually due to human skin, right?
I think so,
or
yeah.
skin in general.
That's the rumor I've seen, is that bees would be able to sting humans more than once if they had evolved differently, like the wasps, which I guess have a different kind of lancet when they shove it into your skin. With honeybees, I know, it's actually two different lancets going in and moving against each other in order to get into the skin. But just in terms of the pain up front is worse. It's more of this burning, angry kind of venom. Whereas the bees, it's more of a just get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
With the wasps, it's like, I hope
that
you will die.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the middle of the night when I woke up and it had just gotten worse, I don't know, I felt like I was in a Danny Glover movie where I was going to take my own arm off. You know?
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. So what Sarah did was...
Well, we should say you were stung twice earlier in the day. And then by one wasp, but potentially multiple times during
Yeah.
the night operation.
Yes. So
Operation
multiple
Eviction. Operation Nocturnal Eviction.
ones. Yeah, so thrice stung. Yeah, that's my new name, Will the Thrice Stung.
So you were just going to get into some plant RX news. So
Yeah.
talking about maybe how we treated your first 2 stings in the afternoon differently from how you treated the night sting. And
Yes. So Sarah's immediate reaction was, well, why don't you put some plantains on it? So plantains are a common weed.
Lawn weed.
You'll see them. I mean, if you saw a picture of one, and we'll put one up.
Common
on
and
the,
narrow.
We'll put one up on the Tumblr at some point, or,
Sure.
or write a post about it. But very common. It's broad. It's got a broad leaf and then a very narrow, tall flower, and it's everywhere. It's anywhere that humans are. It just
Assuming
hangs
you
around.
don't spray for it. Yeah, it's
Assuming you
everywhere.
don't spray for it, that's quite true. Because although the place where I work, they spray for everything, and you see them all over the place.
Plantain for the win.
Yeah, they just want to be loved. You know.
Indeed, like dandelions.
Yeah, like dandelions. They're just there. They want to be around humans. So Sarah had actually mashed up a bunch with a mortar and pestle
Made a poultice.
couple weeks ago. That's a poultice.
For your bee stings,
For
which
bee
we
stings.
discussed last week. Yeah.
Yes. So we put those on the 2 wounds I had from earlier in the day. And I noticed that when I woke up in the middle of the night with the pain, that I didn't feel the other 2. In fact, I had forgotten where they were, which is always a good sign.
Yeah.
But this wound, I hadn't put on as much of it. I hadn't tied down the
Sort of
poultice.
bandaged it
Yeah,
down.
like bandaged it down, let it sit there for an hour or 2 to get into the skin. So, shout out to plantains, which are awesome. And we woke up this morning, the wasps were all angry, flying around. The snake was out in the backyard eating something.
Yes, it was. It was throat deep into a burrow of some
Yeah.
kind, you said.
Yeah.
All I heard was the cries for help.
Yeah, not good. So anyway, he was angry and out eating things. The wasps were out and about. Their nest was now exposed, and so
And also sitting in front of our front door
Yes.
and across our project area of the
Yes,
patio.
we could not continue with the timber operation with that there. So sadly, with some sadness, because I had to admire their tenacity, I poured boiling water all over them, and I'll put some pictures up because I found the queen,
Yeah.
which is even more terrifying than regular
Bee queen.
yellow jackets.
Oh, yellow jacket.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the little ones compared to the queen. She must have been 3 times their size.
Yeah.
Just absolutely
I can
crazy
vouch for that.
looking. She had a crazy, like a red dot on her,
Oh, she was
stomach.
marked? No, she's kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody planted that there. But, I mean, yeah, I don't want to take anybody out that I don't have to in terms of pests and animals and stuff. But, I mean, one good thing is that wasps do try to rob beehives. So it's actually probably just as well that we got rid of them.
And to Will's credit, so we're working on the replacement of these landscaping or hardscaping timbers in our patio, which is directly adjacent to our pollinator garden, the Bisha medicinal herb garden.
Yeah.
And you really, really, really did not want to use any kind of insecticide or pesticide
Yes.
spray, which I appreciated. And you paid the price, my friend.
Yes.
So you paid the blood price there.
Blood prices.
Yeah.
Several stings later, I lived to tell the tale. I mean, I suppose you could be allergic. I get a feeling that it's a different venom than the bee venom. I have to look at the biology of it. I'd be interested to know like what the chemicals are.
Yeah.
Because man, they will mess you up, those little guys.
But like you were saying, that plantain poultice, you can use either the common plantain leaf or the narrow
Yeah.
plantain leaf. Mash it up any way you can. We've read that in a pinch, you can even masticate it using your own darn teeth in your mouth and spit out a nice slimy wad of it and slap it on a bee sting or any other kind of mere flesh wound, skin abrasions.
Yep.
It's good for that. It's good for treatment of that. So we're going to probably come back to chores, potentially. But while we're on the subject of plant RX...
We're actually at 34 minutes.
Oh, we're doing good.
Yeah.
And natural healing. I wanted to mention that I'm finally getting over my annual epic poison ivy debacle.
Annual is right, yes.
So, poison ivy is never a surprise, right? I mean... Like, you know what it looks like. Leaves of three, let them be.
Yeah.
You know when it's going to appear. You know that it's going to appear because the birds eat the berries and disperse them. And apparently our farmer neighbor, as a child, also ate the berries and said they were delicious.
Yeah, that's some crazy
That's some
stuff.
next level stuff.
Do not try that at home.
Don't try that at home.
Please.
But according to Farmer Tom, poison ivy berries are delicious.
Yeah.
I really do my best every year because I have a public performance day job, where I'm up in front of people most of the day, every day. I am a clown. I'm a shill for the man. No, I'm an instructor. But, I try to spare our students and by maintaining my basic appearance, which I hope to be unoffensive, by not contracting poison ivy until after commencement, when I'm no longer standing in front of people for most of the day, every day, 5 days a week. Then all bets are off and I am running buck wild through the woods. Or more accurately, this year, I'm weeding the invasive vine, mile-a-minute vine, which we affectionately call devil's spaghetti, because we found one of the best ways to eradicate it is to let it grow in, and then twine it around a pitchfork like a giant plate of spaghetti noodles. Because of the fact that it has those spiny, burry thorns, it kind of sticks to itself. And it's got very shallow root systems, so it's pretty easy to uproot that way. So I was weeding mile-a-minute vine out of our brambles during the tornado watch storm which we had earlier this past week, during which Will saw basically like a shelter in place warning, and my grandparents called to say, hey, we just saw the short-term weather forecast for Ellerson and it doesn't look very good, you should make sure that you're inside. But I was almost done, so I was staying outside in the thunder, in the downpour, in the poison ivy patches. So here's the thing. So this weeding project took place over 48 hours, over 2 days. The first day, I knowingly came into contact with poison ivy because I was pulling that poison ivy vine growth off of that stump up by the bramble, because we were sacrificing all these berries due to their proximity with the poison ivy. So what did I do before I came in that day? I went down to the end of our paved driveway, along the ditch along the road, where we have all of this jewelweed coming in. And jewelweed is, again, a weed of wildflower that has this beautiful kind of pitcher-shaped orange flower that comes in. It also does
that popping thing when you touch it.
Yeah, the seed pods, when you touch them, pop open to disperse the seeds. Pretty cool.
Yeah, those are cool.
But I believe it's the stem and leaf juice that you can kind of, again, mash into a poultice and spread over any area of skin that you've had contact with poison ivy. And it's supposed to neutralize that oil. Do you remember what it's called? Or is it urushiol oil, Will? That causes the rash in most people when they come into contact with poison ivy. So, day one, I've done a lot of mile-a-minute vine weeding. I know I've come into contact with poison ivy because I've been weeding poison ivy vine. I go down, I grab some jewelweed, I basically tear apart the leaves and the stems and literally just rub them on my arms and my hands. I wake up the next morning and I've got no rash.
Yeah.
Now I'm feeling a little bit of, hubris, right? I'm kind of cocky.
Downfall.
Yes. So I continue my weeding of mile-a-minute vine. I don't knowingly come into contact with poison ivy, although I definitely sighted it throughout the day. I come in that day, I skip the step, of using any jewelweed. I also don't really scrub with any mean green scrubber, which we will say will probably one day be illegal because it does contain those polyethylene granules, those little microscrubber plastic beads. So this is something that when we use it out at the rain barrel or out at the water source down by the pole barn. It's not something that we put into our septic system. Yeah. And we use it very sparingly.
But you didn't use the jewelweed either.
Right. I used basically nothing. I kind of took a shower and that was about it.
Yeah.
All right. So it's the next morning. And I have poison ivy.
You do.
I do. And next morning, I have even more of it.
More poison ivy.
And over the next few days, I've got more and more poison ivy coming in, partially because I'm wearing some of the same clothes to do some of the same outdoor work, partially because I'm wearing clothes that have come into contact with my weeding clothes. Will also took steps to change the towels, change the sheets, burn my wardrobe. No, just kidding. But we did go through the process of laundering all of my clothes and not re-wearing anything. And so that's been, I would say, about I guess that was really technically before the last podcast because it's been now a little more than a week since I've had.
I feel like it got worse though.
It did get worse.
Yeah.
It was probably, I probably could have sought medical attention for that.
Yeah, you know when you have to, you know you have to go to the doctor and you don't.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So my arm did swell up and
Yeah.
my skin did slough off as if I had a 2nd-degree burn.
Yeah.
But I'm now looking a lot better.
I agree.
And itching a lot less, at least as far as the poison ivy is concerned. Now I've got polymorphic light eruption, but that's a whole nother ball game.
But you, I mean,
You can Google it.
you, you were somewhat incapacitated. You couldn't do things you normally did just because of the way it affected like just the way you were moving around, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was on my forearms, it was on my hands. We went to an Independence Day barbecue, and I wore long sleeves because I didn't want to compromise anyone's appetite with
You
the
looked like a
appearance of
burn
my arms.
victim. No offense.
No,
On your arms.
I understand it was pretty bad.
On your arms, yeah.
So, jewelweed, so my method of recovery for the poison ivy included, again, the mean green scrubber, which, full disclosure, has the polyethylene plastic microbeads in it. So use it under extraordinary
Apparently.
conditions, which I think this qualified. Ongoing use, application of jewelweed, application of Ivorest, which contains calamine lotion, as well as 2 other substances that are meant to sort of, one is a topical analgesic, so that dulls the pain and the itching, and the other is a drying agent. I think it's alcohol-based to dry out the rash. I also we have aloe gel just as kind of an extreme moisturizer for when we get burns. And again, we were kind of the whole time comparing a particular area of my outbreak to a 2nd-degree burn, the way that the skin blistered up and kind of sloughed off. So I was using a lot of aloe once I started re-moisturizing for that. And I'm only recently back on my full cocoa butter regime.
You could take Benadryl, but then you sleep for like 3 days. So.
Yeah, so I think I did that for one night to get me through the night. So that's our Plant RX plant-based wellness for stings, insect stings, and other minor flesh wounds. You can look into plantain poultice. For poison ivy, particularly the oil neutralization, look into jewelweed.
It's awesome. It also grows next to poison ivy, which is funny.
Yeah, they kind of like a similar environment.
Yeah.
Ours is growing in our runoff ditch between the road and our property, which is just perfect.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Do you want to move to news since we're...
I think we probably
Pretty far,
should.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so while you're getting the new stuff out, I'll just mention in terms of Team Baby Bird. So again,
What's the score?
Yeah, I think we're doing good.
Yeah.
For the relationship between Team Baby Bird and the black rat snakes, you want to check out the Come On Happy Chickens Come On post at our Tumblr, spreadcast.tumblr.com. But in general, we're having our 2nd hatch of mockingbirds. We know they've already had a hatch nest that have fledged. We did, or at least I did, think I witnessed one mockingbird hatchling, get taken off by a squirrel. Which I verified with the internet, so it's obviously true.
Yes.
That squirrels will sometimes nest rob hatchlings, which is very sad. So we're seeing our 2nd hatch of mockingbirds. We're seeing a hatch of blue jays, which I know are sort of annoying, and they themselves are egg and nest robbers, but the blue jay hatchling was really cute, so we're going to be posting photos of that soon at our Tumblr. What other babies have we had around? We've had bunny babies, so we're expanding the concept of Team Baby Bird from just the chickens and the mockingbirds to the blue jays, to the bunnies, to the baby turkeys. We've had the 2 turkey hens with their combined brood of 10 chicks, which we've seen. We had at least a 2nd sighting of them. You can see the original sighting at the Tumblr.
I have an update for Team Baby Bird. We had a hawk come through the neighborhood the other day, but the crows chased it off.
Thank you, crows. A murder of crows.
A murder of crows. You could hear them, and then you would occasionally see the hawk flying around, and then just this, big clutch of crows flying after it and pecking at it. So yeah, crows are on our side too.
All right, they're on Team Baby Bird.
Everybody's on Team Baby Bird.
And in terms of the birdhouses that separate or delineate the boundary between our property, Satoyama Homestead, and the local private trust, we know that we had houses occupied by wrens and by bluebirds. I'm not actually sure how the wrens did. I feel like they were probably bringing back forage to hatchlings, but I never saw them at all.
Never saw anything.
The bluebirds for sure have hatchlings that they are feeding, and that we can hear.
They might have
peeping and
graduated.
feeding. They might have fledged.
I think so, because I haven't really seen them around.
I saw them, if not today, then yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. Both mom and dad had mouthfuls of these little green worms. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you did see them. All right.
Yeah. So Team Baby Bird update. Everybody seems to be doing good.
Score's good. Yeah.
All right.
All right. You got your newspaper. You got your Lancaster farming there.
I do. So we're going to do Lancaster farming again, the Saturday, July 11th edition. We forgot to give the date. It is indeed Saturday, July 11th, 2015.
Man.
I'm going to start in A section, and
Fast.
I think Will has something also from B section.
I do.
There's a big theme in A section this week about water. So I want to just highlight a couple of the articles because, as far as I'm concerned, two things. First, water is life. As far as life as we know it, we need water. Secondly,
All right, Muad'Dib.
yeah, and the spice must flow.
Yes.
Secondly, essentially, we're all downstream, right? I mean, you've seen that bumper sticker, but it's basically true that
Sure.
if you put something into the water or take water away from where it is, you're most likely impacting whoever and whatever is living downstream of you. So some things to keep in mind as we read these water-related headlines. From page A1, section A, the cover, Bay cleanup upheld again, dealing Farm Bureau a loss. This is another article written by staff writer Philip Gruber. This is regarding a court decision of the Farm Bureau versus the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So it says the 60-page ruling upheld a lower court decision from 2013. That was a quote. Quoting the American Farm Bureau Federation, Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and other agricultural groups had argued that the EPA's prescriptions for the Bay cleanup were too detailed and allowed the agency to usurp powers belonging to the states. End quote. So here we've got this like states' rights federalism debate going on.
Yeah.
Further down in the article, quoting, the regulations posted by the EPA have to deal with what's called total maximum daily load. So quoting here, the total maximum daily load, or TMDL, governing the Chesapeake cleanup defines limits for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment pollution from several sources, such as agriculture and urban stormwater for each state in the Bay watershed. Still quoting, the goals were established by the EPA and Bay states in 2010. They are to be 60% achieved 2 years from now and fully achieved by 2025. Still quoting, Pennsylvania agriculture is seriously behind on its pollution reduction goals and fell under EPA's highest level of scrutiny last year as a result. Pennsylvania is the only state under this backstop level of oversight. So I'm going to flip over to page A7 to continue with this article. The only thing I want to add here, quoting again, the states, not the EPA, are the ones who have to determine how the TMDL requirements will be met, which further weakens the Farm Bureau's arguments, the judge said in this analysis, right? So again, the EPA sets the total maximum daily load, but it's up to states to determine how they're going to meet or fall under the TMDL. Judge Ambrose was careful, it says here, to distinguish the Chesapeake case, in which the EPA's regulatory scheme was challenged, from cases about waters of the United States, in which the question is whether the EPA has the authority to regulate the waters at all. And we're going to be looking at an article about waters of the United States in a second. So that's the first coverage of the result of that court case, which was in favor of the EPA and not of the Farm Bureau, that the EPA's regulatory scheme is sound.
Now, so the Chesapeake Bay watershed, I mean, are we in that technically in our area, or
Yes.
we are in it?
I believe we are.
So
yeah.
I mean, that's several states. That's federal government has jurisdiction over some things, states have jurisdiction over others. Like, very complex issue.
Yeah, it's a federal and state partnership, but and for whatever reason, the other states participating have been able to meet their goals, and it seems that Pennsylvania is the one that's come under this additional scrutiny. So that was, again, from the article, the cover article, Bay Cleanup Upheld Again, Dealing Farm Bureau Loss, written by staff writer Philip Gruber. So down on page A11, the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau has written their response, and that is entitled Chesapeake Bay Ruling a Disappointment. So I'm going to quote from the Farm Bureau's response, where they say, quote, EPA itself projects that roughly 20% of cropped land in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, about 600,000 acres, will have to be removed from food production to be converted to grassland or forest to achieve water quality goals. And this is quoting someone who's commenting, quote, placing 1/5 of the watershed's fertile farmland into retirement will have a significant impact on local communities and local food systems, according to Rick Ebert, the Farm Bureau's president. So this is interesting. Now we're bringing in this second absolute requirement of life as we know it, which is nutrition and food. So not only is this a states' rights versus federalism debate, it's now a food production versus water cleanliness debate, which is kind of interesting.
Wow.
So jumping back a little bit, again, we're still on the theme of water. I want to remind folks, I don't remember what year it was. It was very recent that in Ohio, anyone who got their drinking water from, Lake Erie, they weren't able to drink their tap water, right, because of that insane algae bloom.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's an article here from the Associated Press written by John Seward that gives us an update on that situation. So still on the theme of water. This is again on page A7 of the Saturday, July 11th edition of Lancaster Farming. The title is, or the headline is, Years Will Be Needed to Gauge Efforts to Cut Lake Erie Algae, written by John Seward from the Associated Press, located in Perrysburg, Ohio. So from the beginning of the article, he names state agriculture and environmental leaders, now quoting, will be handing out $12 million to farmers who take steps to reduce the pollutants that wash off their fields and help feed the algae, which have contaminated drinking water supplies and helped create dead zones where fish can't survive. Now the big question is, will it work? Quote, it will be a few years before the changes take root and state officials can determine how much progress is being made in reducing the intensity of the harmful algae blooms. Further down in the article, it mentions that part of that $12 million can be used to incentivize farmers to plant cover crops or grass filter strips or add drainage systems. But again, no one's really sure whether or not these cultural changes in terms of cover cropping, putting grass filtration strips or other drainage systems is actually going to work. So again, we're talking about sources of drinking water. We're continuing on this theme of water is life. We're continuing on this theme of we're all downstream. And of course, we also can't live without food. So how are we going to make this arrangement of agriculture and drinking water conservation work? Just one more article on the topic of water. Flipping over to page A9, still in Lancaster Farming, July 11th edition. We have an article from the American Farm Bureau Federation with the headline, Groups Ask Court to Ditch EPA's Water Rule. So if you recall from the ruling regarding the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau's argument against the Chesapeake Bay cleanup regulations of the EPA, the judge was really clear to differentiate between the EPA's regulatory scheme for the Chesapeake Bay versus the Waters of America Act, or the Waters of America regulation, which is what we're going to talk about now. So quoting from this article, the American Farm Bureau Federation, Texas Farm Bureau, Matagorda County Farm Bureau, and 11 other agricultural and industry groups asked a federal court last week to vacate the controversial new rule redefining the scope of federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act. So their complaint claims that the new rule grants the EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers broad control over land use far beyond what Congress authorized in the Clean Water Act. This rule was proposed in March 2014, and quoting again, according to the complaint, quote, the agencies are determined to exert jurisdiction over a staggering range of dry land and water features, whether large or small, permanent, intermittent, or ephemeral, flowing or stagnant, natural or man-made, interstate or intrastate. Still quoting, the opaque and unwieldy rule leaves the identification of jurisdictional waters so vague and uncertain that plaintiffs and their members cannot determine whether and when the most basic activities undertaken on their land will subject them to drastic criminal and civil penalties under the Clean Water Act. This lawsuit follows 4 similar suits filed by officials representing 27 states, all within 2 days of the new rule's publication on June 29th. So we've been talking a little bit on and off about the Clean Water Act and the expansion of the Waters of America regulation under the EPA. It's something that kind of makes me wear my tinfoil hat a little bit, only because, again, water is life and we're all downstream. So anytime anyone's talking about control of water, I pay attention. But I also want to point out at the bottom of this article, the co-plaintiffs from the American Farm Bureau Federation, because they're keeping some interesting company. So co-plaintiffs include, quote, the American Petroleum Institute, the American Road and Transportation Builders, Leading Builders of America, National Alliance of Forest Owners, National Association of Home Builders, National Association of Manufacturers, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, National Corn Growers Association, National Mining Association, National Pork Producers Council, and Public Lands Council. Some of those are interesting bedfellows, but again, anytime water makes the news, you need to sit up and pay attention, because water is life. So that takes care of our water theme. I had one quick positive update in terms of poultry culture. I'll just read the headline from page A3 of the Saturday, July 11th edition of Lancaster Farming. Pittsburgh eases path for chickens and urban farming. So based on the efforts of a group of collaborators called the Pittsburgh Pro Poultry People, Pittsburgh is updating their regulations with respect to keeping chickens and other poultry as well as small goats within city limits. So you can look at the updates. They're reducing the cost to receive the permit as well as all of the requirements necessary to achieve a permit. So definitely check that out if you're in the Pittsburgh area and you'd like to begin some urban poultry culture. I don't know, Will, if you want to take care of your article now and then go into briefs, or if you want to do ag briefs and then talk about your article.
So mine actually did have to do with water, but it's flipped the script here. So this is From Grass to Jerky by Guy L. Stuck from the Massachusetts, New Hampshire correspondent for Lancaster Farming. So this is in Jefferson, New Hampshire. The Von Dormans have a jerky farm. It's cattle farm where they will be producing quite a bit of jerky. But in terms of water, they dehydrate their own jerky using a huge commercial dehydrator, which cost them a couple $1,000s. So he says, Bert says, you need to bring the meat to a temperature of 208 Fahrenheit for 2 hours to kill the bacteria, then drop the temperature to 165 for 6.5 hours for dehydration. So he needs to pull that moisture out in order to make a good batch. A 10-pound batch of hamburger makes how much jerky, do you think?
10 pounds, and then you'd have to know how much of that is water. I'm going to go with 2.5 pounds of jerky.
That's a little bit too much. It's actually 4.5. So
okay.
4.5 pounds. So you're talking about the meat.
It's still less than half.
Yes, the meat that comes off the cows is half water, more or less.
Yeah.
They use a commercial spice blend, which so they make original cracked pepper, garlic, teriyaki, and hot and spicy. Not all this. That's not all one flavor. That's separate flavors. But yeah, you're talking about water is life. Water also encourages the growth of bacteria.
Which is life.
Which is life, and things that will eat your jerky before you do. So,
and we mentioned that we were dehydrating some herbs and some flowers, and that's absolutely true. We also run a dehumidifier in our basement, which we empty into our rain barrels to keep the water cycle in action. But yeah, excess of water can be just as problematic as insufficient water.
Yeah, it's important to figure out how to do that. So yeah, very, very cool. I wish them the best of luck. Best of luck with their jerky operation.
Sounds delicious. I like their flavors. So I'm going to flip over to some ag briefs, and we're going to wrap up with an article that ties into something I was talking about last week regarding human labor versus technology. But let's flip over to, I believe it's A16, indeed it is, to talk about some ag briefs. So we're going to highlight some things from the ag briefs out of Lancaster Farming's July 11th edition. From the national news, Feds to step up avian flu monitoring this fall. So just be aware the federal government has announced plans to step up monitoring of wild birds for avian influenza this fall to provide an early warning of any resurgence of a disease that devastated poultry farms in the upper Midwest. If you want more on that, you can check out, this is an Associated Press brief. Moving on from there, the headline is, Alabama burglary suspect chased by bull through pasture. I think I smell a new home watch animal in demand here.
There you go.
So from Arab, Alabama, again from the AP, sheriff's officials in northern Alabama say a burglary suspect was taken into custody after being chased by a bull through a cow pasture. So if you want to protect your home from breaking and entering, look into getting a bull.
The farm protects itself.
Indeed. Further down through the ag briefs, another headline here is Kentucky to use tobacco settlement funds for hemp project. This is out of Frankfort, Kentucky, again from the Associated Press. Quoting, the state board that manages the tobacco settlement funds has approved $500,000 in grants and loans to a Winchester company that plans to process hemp seed grown in Kentucky. Which is great because only recently have we seen new potentials and possibilities for growing hemp domestically here in the United States. Once you have it, what do you do with it? You need some kind of processing. So now we're seeing some money being put into the potentials for processing hemp here in the United States, which is awesome because it has applications in clothing and fibers, applications in construction, applications in food and nutrition. So that should make folks happy. So those are all the ag briefs. I just saw a headline about ash borer, so you'll have to excuse me. The ag briefs that we wanted to highlight today. And unless, Will, you have any other ag news to highlight, I wanted to wrap up with this very touching article called No More Roar as Famed Futures Pits Comes to an End. This is from the National Ag News section on page A10 of Lancaster Farming, Saturday, July 11th edition. And this is about the trading pits on futures commodity prices, agricultural commodity prices. So quoting from the article, on Monday, this was written by Bernard Condon and Don Babwin of the Associated Press out of New York. On Monday, most futures pits in Chicago and New York, where frenzied buying and selling once helped set prices on cattle and corn and dozens of other commodities, closed for good. Traders yelled and shoved and flashed hand signals just as they did in the movie Trading Places. But now the computer, faster, cheaper, and not nearly as noisy, has taken over. It was a sad day for Pete Megan, still in the pits 34 years after dropping out of college, donning a trading jacket, and mustering the courage to tell his dad. Quoting Megan, I thought he was going to kill me, but he was like, I don't care if you pick up garbage or you're a dog groomer. If you are happy what you are doing, you're ahead of 99% of the people in the world. Megan, now 54, recalled. So again, here we've got someone drops out of college at the age of 20. Because of an experience that he had in a trading pit, decides to become a commodities future trader, an ag commodities future trader, has to break the news to his dad, and how awesome is it that his dad was like, hey, if you're enjoying your day job, you've got it going on, right? Further on in the article, so they're not only losing the few dozen human jobs that are left in ag commodities futures trading, but also, quote, they're losing a rich culture of brazen bets, flashy trading jackets, which you can see pictured in the article here, and kids just out of high school getting a shot at making it big. Quoting further on, the pits that close dealt in futures or contracts to buy or sell something at a later date at a set price. They're used by farmers to lock in prices for their crops before harvest, and for instance, and investors as a way to bet that prices will go up or down. So again, with these commodities futures trading, we're talking about setting food prices over time, right? So further on in the article, it's going to describe this transition between human traders to computer or high-frequency trades, computerized trades. Where once futures on everything from pork bellies and wheat to treasuries and eurodollars were only traded in this open outcry system, now just 1% are. Quoting another broker, there were 5 people in the wheat pit today, according to broker Virginia McGathy, who lamented on July 1st after the closing bell in Chicago. Quote, back in the day, there were 400. Scott Shalady, a broker standing nearby, worries that fewer humans could mean more violent swings in food prices. So he says, that pit with 500 guys, you can't have a flash crash because there are 499 people that know that guy doesn't normally trade that big. So again, we're talking about with human traders, you've got some context, you've got some reasoning, you've got an empathy and understanding of the consequences of trades that could go down and be bad news. With computerized trading and high-frequency trades, you've got the implications of the globalized network of trading systems and globalization, which can lead to global sharing of surplus goods, but also the destabilization of local markets. Down at the bottom of the article, I'm going to quote someone, Dan Grant. So the article says, Dan Grant, who began his career as a runner ferrying messages between clerks and now oversees his own trading firm, said he has embraced change but still mourns the loss of the kind of entry-level positions that gave kids without much education a chance to prove themselves, just as he did. And Dan Grant says, the customer doesn't have to call anyone to execute a trade. So we're talking about loss of local control of markets. We're talking about loss of economic and professional opportunities for people for whom this is an obvious passion, something that they enjoy. And also the loss of the human relationships and the centrality of human relationships in exchanging goods and services and resources. So again, last week we touched a bit on manual work versus work with machines, and how technology is sometimes not a valid or viable substitute for human labor. And I think, again, on the theme of water and food being essential to human well-being, this mechanization and computerization of commodities, agricultural commodities future trading, is something that we need to keep an eye on due to its impact on pricing, due to its impact on distribution of goods. So that was kind of a bittersweet article, and I was a little worried because when I read it earlier today, I actually teared up a bit, but I got through it okay. So I think, does that bring us to the end of our agenda this week?
Yeah, definitely. So the show notes and the transcript will be on spreadcast.tumblr.com.
That's right.
This is episode 2, so look for that. Again, we put out the invitation to submit your questions to us, which we'll try to answer. That's also on spreadcasts.tumblr.com.
Look for the Ask Us Almost Anything link. You can also email us at satoyama@ruggedinbox.com, or use the contact form at our Homestead website, which is satoyamahs.org.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
All right. This is the original Transplants signing off, episode 2.
Thanks for listening.